she's being interviewed by Brenda Hepler, and it is September 2nd, 2009. All right, so to begin with, Teresa, what are your first childhood memories of libraries?
I grew up mostly in Sheridan, Indiana, and so my first memories are of our hometown library, which was a Carnegie library. My great-grandmother, Margaret Celeste Mordock, was one of the librarians there, and so I remember going there and reading the books and all the big wood and just very comfortable feeling of the library and of that space. And our kindergarten, for a little while there was a fire at the school, and so the kindergarten met in the basement, and so I have lots of very, very fond, warm memories of my childhood library.
And was reading important to you growing up?
Very important. I mean, my brothers used to joke that they could never get me out of the house to go play or do other things, and reading was very, very important.
What was your favorite book?
The one that jumps in the most is Charlotte's Web, and then I also liked The Wizard of Oz before we started watching it all the time on, what was it, Sunday night theater, Disney's Family, whatever. But yeah, so Charlotte's Web, probably.
And so you mentioned Sheridan, Indiana. Is that where you basically grew up?
I was, born in Indiana and went to school part of the time in Sheridan, and then moved to Southern California through part of late elementary school into high school, and then finished high school and went to college in Sheridan, Indiana. Yeah, back and forth.
What's the university in Sheridan, Indiana?
Well, there's not. Indiana University in Bloomington.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So.
And what awareness of community did you have while growing up?
This question was sort of one of those harder ones because we lived way out in the country, so it wasn't, like we were in town doing it. But I would say probably centered around school and church. So doing a lot through Sunday school, vacation Bible school, those kinds of things. So that was, and a big family. My grandparents, my grandfather, there were 15, and my grandmother 5 or something. So, big family, but not so much the sense of community that I would say we sense now, that I feel now in Lafayette.
The family can be, if it's big, it becomes a community.
Yeah, it's a time-consuming community.
And so you said you went back and I presume you graduated from the University of Indiana.
University. University. That one's in Pennsylvania.
And did you go on for graduate work at all?
I did. So Indiana University did my undergraduate, and then worked at the university for about a year, and then moved back to Southern California and worked with security, so across my education a little bit, but worked with Security Pacific Venture Capital and got my MBA at Pepperdine. So I do have a postgraduate.
And as an adult, what were your early community experiences?
I actually had to think through this. In college, I did work through the volunteer program at the college. I did work with the Plainfield, Indiana Juvenile Detention Center, and we took groups of people there and, visited the teens and youth who were incarcerated there, and different leadership activities at the university. And then probably not really until, I did some volunteer work with kids while I was working and before I got married, but probably the real community and those kinds of things happened more after I got married and we were in our first home.
And what attracted you to Lafayette, and how long have you lived here?
We were attracted to Lafayette because my husband was transferred from Southern California up here to the Bay Area by Bank of America. And he moved up first, and I was pregnant with our now youngest, almost 14-year-old. He moved up here first and started looking, and basically sort of drew a circle around his office and said, I want to look in these places. And then when we moved up, he had narrowed it pretty much to this area, Moraga, Renda, Danville, all around there. And when we moved up, we stayed in the apartment temporarily at Carroll Lane, and just the schools and the atmosphere, and Mackenzie started at Spring Hill temporarily, and going to the events with the schools, we said, okay, this is where we belong. So
yeah, that's great. And defining the goals of community.
Oh, and I've been here for 14 years.
Yeah. Well, we figured that out.
Yeah, by the math and
the
the almost 14, yeah.
Defining the goals of a community as a place of mutual support, shared values, and the acceptance of difference. How do you see Lafayette meeting these goals?
Well, being involved, I think, as much as I am, I think we're doing a great job. But stepping back and saying, could we do better in, certain areas? For me, I think that Lafayette's doing a great job. I think our whole philosophy of volunteerism and community involvement and being very transparent about how decisions are made and all of those kinds of activities and outreach, I think we're doing a great job. Somebody else might say that there are only a few people who are doing everything and are being involved. But I think all in all, are there areas where we could do better? Always. But I think all in all, that's part of the lure of the community too, is that we're all in it together and that we do all kind of reach out. So it would be interesting to hear what other people who haven't been as involved. But I came, 14 years ago. I wasn't a native resident of Lafayette and felt very welcomed and very much, given opportunities to be as involved as you want to be.
You suggest that you do it.
Yeah.
And what are your earliest memories of the Lafayette Library?
So I went to the library quite a bit when the girls were younger. So we would go there and check out the books and do the story time and basically, so it's sort of the coming back in as part of a place to go, a place to take the kids as a distraction and a diversion, and very welcoming, very warm.
How often do you personally use the Lafayette Library?
Well, this is the part where I wish that I was able to use it more. I actually am in there a couple of times a month, but I would say more for meetings and a gathering place. And the good news is some of it for Sweet Thursdays or, different programs that are going on. But a lot of it right now has to do with meeting there for volunteers and opening day celebrations and those kinds of things. So I answered your second part there as well.
Yeah.
But I would say a couple of times a month. And when I do go, I like the audio books for putting in the car, the CDs for putting in the car when I'm traveling around, and probably spend a little more time online before I actually go in to, kind of make sure that the book's there and cut down on my time. So.
Yeah. How do you feel a library serves a community?
Well, probably it ties into where we were. We're talking about how I used it.
Yeah.
I think absolutely for the parents with young children, the Miss Donna and her storytelling and all the programs that go on there. For the kids after school, a place to go on their way with being centrally located with the elementary school and the middle school. And I think, for an hour or so after school gets out, that's a place where kids can go and, be safe. So I think it absolutely serves that. And then when I'm there, I see that there are a lot of the retired, not say senior, but retired members of our community go there and use it as a great resource. And as I mentioned, a lot of us use it for meetings and other activities so I think it serves as a community gathering place and resource.
All right, thank you. So now, how have you been involved in the library over the years, and if so, in what way? Well, that's redundant. Okay, so your involvement with the library, short of using it now.
Yeah, so as a user, definitely would be one answer to that. Prior to really getting involved with the campaign for the new library, with the existing library, I was what I'll call a dues-only member of the Friends. I paid my dues and I got my little library, Friends of the Library tote bag, and kept up with following the newsletter and that, but mostly primarily as a user prior to getting actively involved in the campaign.
And when did you get actively involved?
About 2001. So that was with the existing library.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's go down then. So why was this new library important enough to you to become involved with it? That's
sort of one of the new.
Because you came in after the Vision Task Force, right?
I did.
Okay. So you became involved in 2001, and why? What drew you to it?
Ann Appert and Ann Groden.
True. Give them credit.
Yeah, a little bit of being recruited, I mean, I'd been following where the building was going to be sited, and I'd been, watching and looking at the work of the library, the Visions 2000, and had sat in a board meeting when Ann Groden presented information about it, but hadn't, other than giving input, hadn't been actively involved in serving on the committee. There were already members on the library building committee from the school board. And Ann Appert and Ann Groden invited me to come and start looking at, could we raise the money? Who were the potential donors in town, and how did we identify that? And so through those first initial meetings, I became a member of the Lafayette Community Foundation and sat on that board. And then my main activity on the Lafayette Community Foundation was the library, working with Ann Appert, Ann Groden, Don Tutson, Judy Garvins. I'm looking around the table, Phil Chernin, and several of the meetings were at Phil's office around his table. And Maeve Pessis was involved at that point as well in that particular group. I know she was very involved in the library in many hats, but we sat around the conference room table and sort of looked at how we were going to move forward with it. It was about that time that the consultant had been hired, the first consultant, Susan Carson. And basically we did some focus groups, recommended some people that should be talked to about whether or not this was a viable project for the community. And the word then from the consultant wasn't all that promising, but she hadn't met Ann Groden, or others who said, yeah, thank you, that's good data. We'll use that data, but we think that we can do this. It's never been done before, so people don't know what they're capable of in Lafayette. They've always been givers outside of the community, but not so much targeting their philanthropy dollars into the community because a project like this hadn't occurred. So mostly I got involved by being asked. It became, and has been, I actually am looking at the dates, that it didn't feel like it's been that long. It feels like just yesterday we were sitting around that conference room table beginning to gather people in, and then now the number of volunteers, the number of donors, and how big, and the building coming up in the middle of town. It says, oh, okay, it was 2001, it has been a while.
So, but what triggered you to want to participate? I mean, yes, they invited you, but why did you say yes?
Oh, because it was exciting. Yeah, I mean, it was something, I touched on a little bit in, when the consultant said, I'm kind of going around in circles, but when the consultant said, oh, you can't do it, it was, the need is there, people have, identified the site for it, we can make this move forward. And so it was exciting to think about being involved in a public-private partnership that would have lasting impact for the community. And it was a natural tie-in to, I'm on the school board and was on the school board at that time. It was a natural tie-in to the partnership between the schools and the city and the foundation on providing this Center for Lifelong Learning. And so that's really what kept it going. Being asked, definitely was the impetus, but keeping it going and keeping it exciting for what's now coming up on 9 years, definitely was because of the opportunity to do something really exciting in Lafayette.
Right. And what roles have you played? You said you were on the
steering committee.
Steering committee,
right.
And then being on the school board,
right.
Also integrated, I presume.
Right. Because the part of the bond agreement, and I'll kind of go all over the place with just my communication style, but part of the bond, part of the application for the state grant had a partnership. They were strengthened and had a component that was required to have a joint partnership with the schools, the library, and the city. And so that piece of it was very exciting in working out the details of what the schools could actually really contribute to. And then also, once again, kind of back to Ann Groden, she built the community foundation sort of inviting, the way she invited people to be on the foundation board or to be a part of it was to look at all of the different constituents in the community and where were the potential partnerships that would create a synergy to make it work. And so Ann and I were schools, and Judy Carney was, schools and community, and everybody had sort of a group that they represented in a, not tightly sort of legal way, but that each of us came to the table representing different constituents. So we had the parents and younger kids and could bring a different view to that. So that was one role. And then as it went forward, being part of the steering committee, I was on the major donor and donor outreach part of it. I had until we found somebody else to do it, I helped with managing volunteers, helped with, because I have, this will not get out even though we're being taped, I have pretty good technical skills. So in terms of databases and spreadsheets and things like that, I helped start that. Ann Grodin had it really far along, and I kind of just kept taking it and oversaw with Ann Mitchell and some others the purchase of our donor management software and training of people on that. So a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, it was the steering committee, so we weren't really separated out into communications and finance, the way that the board is set up and structured now with new Lafayette Library and Learning Center Foundation Board. I also was with Don Tatson, and Steve Falk and Gwen, one of the first group of speakers who went out to speak to all the different groups all over town. Yeah, and Ann Grodin. I mean, we all went. And then after a while, Don Tatson and I became co-chairs of the public campaign. So in the early days, we were involved in the quiet campaign and structuring it and what's it going to look like and what's the message. And we just sort of kept growing as it went along. So you can't see the moving of the hands but everything kind of just kept rolling along as it, moved forward and bringing in, it's incredible how many talented, really knowledgeable, really gifted people we have in Lafayette who are willing to work for free. So we did, as it moved along, different people came along and took over different pieces.
Yeah, it is amazing.
So the quiet campaign first, and then when we launched the public campaign, Don and I were the co-chairs of that campaign, which was really just the launch with the April 17th event, and then we moved into more neighborhood parties and house parties and going out and speaking. But I know Don and I was looking back at the spreadsheet, and we had it all laid out on which groups to go speak to and who was going to speak to them. And Don and I spoke to a lot of groups during that time.
Were there any obstacles that you came upon and that you had to overcome?
I would say probably not enough time in the day would be one of the biggest ones. The amount of time, no real obstacle that stopped you. There were definitely challenges along the way. You could have looked at the original consultant saying, you can't do this. Yeah, as a, you're not gonna, actually in fairness, she didn't say you can't do this. She said, everything points to it being really difficult unless you have this, this, and this. So of course then we got this, and this. The Friends made their big angel, gift. The first couple of $1 million gifts came in. And so then the momentum started. So the amount of time that it takes, which is well known, for people to go from hearing about something to actually donating and how many times you have to talk to them, would seem like challenges, but they were just part of what you do to get the done. So, but I would say time and volunteers, number of people.
Oh, yeah, the numbers are definitely there. Any wonderful memories or things that were particularly rewarding or particularly fun in your experiences, and what were they?
So the very specific, I would say going out and speaking to people about the library was very fun. And Steve Falk had started out doing a lot of those presentations, and so Robin Fox and Robin Holt built on his talk, and then we all took the talk as part of our own and how we would deliver it. But going out to the community and building excitement for it was probably one of the specific task-oriented, most memorable. But even as I was driving up here and coming to your house and say, okay, I would have never known Brenda Hepler. I would not have even known that this part of Lafayette existed. So actually the probably the biggest thing is the meeting all the people as we've gone along. And as I was rolling my hands, as everything rolled along and the number of people who have come to this, I wouldn't have met a lot of those people. I've been very involved in the schools, very involved in lots of parts of the community, and my kids will tell you that I know everybody, because if you go to Safeway, I know everybody, but I didn't know everybody. So it's been really fun getting to meet all kinds of people.
What values did you feel that this project had that touched on your values?
So the lifelong learning, creating, a place that meets the needs of the communities to provide that learning, and then that doing something outside of myself. So something that's not just about my family, not just about me, but is a benefit to the greater good.
What transformation have you seen in Lafayette relative to the development of this new library? Have you seen any transformation in Lafayette?
So let's see. I think that, and this is going to go back, we've sat at this, at this table somewhere in this house, talking about the sense of community that it has built. I think a lot of people are having the experience of knowing more people and knowing others in the community because of this incredible project that we've all come together to do. And people who have long time residents of Lafayette, to new people, and now as it's coming up out of the ground, you can't keep people away. It's like, I want to volunteer, I want to help, how can we do this? And so that's the transformation I think that's really exciting. And that it's not just kind of about, roads and school, and the schools are a great thing. I don't want people to stop focusing on the schools, but I think it's given people something else to come together around and to have in common. And then I think we'll see transformation. I think some of the restaurants coming, I think some of the actual city development and some of the sort of growth issues that we're having, I think are a little bit because of that people look at Lafayette and say, oh, this is going to be exciting, and look at all this opportunity that's going to be right here in the heart of Lafayette. So I think that as we go along, we'll see more of that. So physical transformation.
Yeah. Why do you think that the citizens of Lafayette have responded so enthusiastically?
I think it's a first of its kind, never been done in Lafayette project since Town Hall Theater, I guess, as Steve Falk would say. Imagine how the people felt 95 or 100 years ago probably now when they opened Town Hall as the central meeting place and gathering place for Lafayette. We hadn't really done that kind of a project.
And how many years ago was that?
I think, at the time we started this, now I'm losing track, but I want to say that building might be coming up on its 100-year anniversary. So I think it grew into something that people wanted to get behind. And I think that there's truly a need. I think that it didn't just come out of, oh, let's do something that's one of its kind, state of the art. I think that there's a real need for that central meeting place for seniors, for youth, for a whole intergenerational coming together. I think the Glen Seaboard Consortium, Learning Consortium, created a whole excitement for a group of people that maybe would not have been excited about, oh, why are you building a library? And I know one of the questions will go to that, but why are you building a bricks and mortar, building facility to do something that we can do from home, or you can do from school or Starbucks, or why are we doing that? And so I think that it's opened up kind of the possibilities for people. And I do think that it's much more interesting than some of the other things that we as a community, absolutely out of necessity have to deal with, like roads and those kinds of downtown strategic plans, but traffic and all of those. But I think that it just gave people something to tie into, and I think some of the fundraising and the neighborhood parties and that brought people together in a way that we wouldn't have had without them.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go on to the library as a future. I think we've pretty much hit on all these. And What outcome do you hope for with this new library? What would you like to see happening with it once it is completed? Anything beyond the bricks and mortar? You know, we've created a place. Now,
Right.
what would be?
Well, I think talking that I was transitioning a little bit there with the Glen Seaboard Learning Consortium, and that's 12 partners. You know, it was a great vision and helped us get a long way in funding and lots of other enthusiasm around the project. But besides those 12 partners, I think the opportunity for the schools, for LASF, for all of the a lot of the Generations in Jazz, Town Hall Theater, people who don't actually have, they aren't specifically in that partnership, that consortium, to provide opportunities, a venue for cultural, arts, science, learning, all back to that lifelong learning, that we'll be able to have a place where you'll, sort of like the gym, say, oh, I saw you there the other day, oh, and run into people. And with the cafe, whoever ends up running that, it'll be another great meeting place. So I have a lot of hope for it bringing us sort of into a more central place, and more about that building community, and more of that getting to know each other better. And back to your question about, are we doing a good job about recognizing differences and things like that, I'm sure there's a whole group of people that I'll meet once that building opens that, I didn't even know they were here, and so that'll be fun. And I think that the other pieces are for the opportunity on how it can drive, not specifically the downtown specific plan, but sort of how Lafayette evolves over the next 10, 15, 20 years. I see that as being a catalyst for what will happen downtown. And I'm also reasonably passionate about the Park Theater, and so I'm hoping that there'll be some opportunities for ways to, maybe have that as another meeting place, another cultural sort of link in all that can happen downtown with the library.
You're talking about it being a catalyst for how the library being a catalyst for how the downtown area will develop, which I think that's very true.
Well, I think we've always built it in the way that structuring it for the grant, state grant, and for fundraising from grant providers outside of Lafayette. It's been billed as a regional resource, and even during as early as back in when the architects were coming and looking at the needs assessment and what to put into the building, it was, we don't want it to be a duplicate of Arenda, we don't want it to be a duplicate of Danville, we want it to be something that creates, and I'm going to use synergy again, but something that creates synergy with within the whole county library system. So I think we've definitely done that. And I think that as a regional resource, once the consortium partners come in and present programs and speakers, we're already feeling that with Commonwealth starting before the library's open, it's going to bring more people to Lafayette. And I can already hear some naysayers in my head saying, oh, we don't want it to grow, we don't want, whatever to happen. But I think what it'll do is it'll revitalize that downtown area. It'll give us, as I was talking about the restaurants coming in and more people coming in, it'll be good for our tax base, all of those things. I just think that I think it will transform Lafayette in positive ways by bringing and making other people, helping us to outreach a little bit, to have a little more diversity. And I think there'll be all kinds of, I think sitting here right now, I probably can't even imagine what changes might take place 10 years down the road, but I can't imagine that we won't have positive changes coming out of it.
Yeah. And we don't know. It's going to happen totally,
right.
Yeah. How do you see a library today? I think this will be my final question. How do you see a library today relative to going beyond a place for books?
We touched a little bit on it. I see it as a place where, from an intergenerational aspect, high school students, retired people, seniors, all different kinds of people can come together to help tutor in our homework center. I see people within the community who have skills and gifts being able to share that information with other people through either our science, arts and science tech lab. Lots of opportunities for the kids and the teens to have a place, and to have a place where they can have their study groups and where they're not on top of each other. I mean, our library is very well used and, has served itself and beyond from what they must have envisioned 40 years ago. And so I do see it as very much, I think sometimes maybe people might say, oh yeah, that's right, while I'm here I can get a book.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I'm going to go there's a speaker, there's Generations in Jazz and the Stanley Music Kids are having a concert in the amphitheater, there's somebody coming, a visiting pianist, or even somebody's recitals in the community hall on our new Steinway Grand Model B piano. And I mean, it sounds cliche, but the opportunities are limitless. And I do have sort of a favorite for who I'm hoping will run the cafe, but lots of opportunities volunteer-wise for all different people in our community. So preschoolers, the Las Trampas Futures Explored Developmentally Disabled, just a way for us all to get to know each other better. Whether that'll happen or not, in terms of the getting to know each other, I don't know, but the other parts of it being so much more than, I really do. I mean, actually coming back to, I can see myself being in there for so many other things and saying, oh, I can get my book here, and I can look at research or use the computers and not have to go all the way back home. I can just stop in at the library. So
That
too much
sounds-
excitement,
yeah,
too
but
much,
it sounds
and
wonderful.
containing.
The end.